Da 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 da! What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes, get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never popped into one of my lives before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And on this show that we have, What's My Good Cheer? It's one of two shows that I have. We have been picking powerful words, one powerful word every week, and every day of that week, well, Monday to Friday, we kind of tear it apart, put it back together. Sometimes it's a silly experience that's relatable to the word that we've picked. Sometimes it's a great insight from somebody, right? Somebody out there that has had that lessons. You know, each one of us have been dealt out a certain amount of cards, kind of like what I'm doing here. I have a whole page of words. We're picking 54 words, but there are many, many more words than those 54 words here, right? And I'm going to put a deck of cards together with these powerful words. But because there's many, many words here that won't make it into the list, does it make these words any less prevalent? Any right? Like this word that we had last week, goals. What if I hadn't picked it? What if it hadn't been one of those words that was going to be included in the deck? Right? Goals is a pretty important word. So when we talk about gaps and we talk about some of those missing lessons, right? It is in our choices whether or not to take those lessons. But then again, you don't always know what lessons you need, right? I was kind of oblivious to the necessity for quite a few of the lessons that have come across my path, even in just my life, let alone the words that I'm picking now. And I tell you, some of these words that I picked, they have taken me for a little bit of a ride. Nothing so uncomfortable that I can't handle it, considering the gift, the reward in the end, right? And if I can resolve some of these issues, some of these misconceptions, some of these perceptions, maybe I'd be doing myself a little bit of service, because I do believe that there are parts of me that will come back in another lifetime with another human. And if those other parts of me could better understand that human, not to say, right, I'm a unique, seriously, I'm a unique. But I think that if those other parts of me do come back, they'll come back in the recognition of something familiar. And I do believe, right? And this is the patterning, this is the impact, this is the adventure, the lessons, the conversations, and right, all of this tallies up. So let's go back to those gaps, right? Hello, Melvin, dear. Hello. Thank you. And you're unique too. Every single person is a unique, but we don't always get to see how unique they are, right? Again, it's in our choices, right? It's always in our choices whether or not to share or to express, right? But what I was going to say there, right, before Melvin, right, distracted me. And that's something I've got to practice, right? Because do want to stay on top of the conversations. But at the same time, I do feel sometimes that I am in that flow. And I do, right? You guys know that I have a little bit of a brain that can easily be distracted, right? So it is in the practicing, right? It is in the practicing. I'm practicing my craft, right? Having a conversation with Melvin, letting him know how much I appreciate him, right? Coming in, keeping me company, right? Keeping me company as I talk away, right? But I'm not just talking away, because these are lessons, if not for anybody else's interest, these are lessons for me. I do believe these are lessons from those other parts of me, because quite often I come back in and I said, where did that come from? Where did I get that idea? But you know what? It's right. Like, it hit the nail on the button. Why didn't I think of it before? And then I'm off and running on to the next one, right? But again, it's to each one of us in our choices. And I've really, I keep bouncing in and out. Choices is a very changing choices, a very uh relevant word in my life. It's something that is feels like it's a push. It's like a necessity, almost like um what is it? A search. It's like it just seems like something that I need to be pursuing all the time, right? And it is in my makeup, and I suspect that the things that come across my path, I have to trust in the lessons. They come across my path for a reason, just like Melvin kind of kicked in and threw me off. But let's see what he says here. The other day, when you were talking about a vehicle trip, I was going to suggest it be in a Jeep. Oh, really? Well, I had the Jeep Rubicon in this past summer's trip. I took the Jeep to Ontario when I went mining for amethyst, and I went on my park tour there, and it was absolutely amazing. But the back end, because I wanted to use the vehicle for car camping, right? That there wasn't enough length there for me to properly stretch out my legs. And I thought, that's just me, and I'm only 5'3", right? What if at some point I want to take somebody on this trip, on one of these trips with me? What are the chances that they're only going to be 5'3", right? Like, I would like a vehicle that somebody would be able to stretch out on if they were 6 feet tall, that they would be comfortable in it. Like my Outlander was excellent for car camping, and it was a 7-seater, but it was absolutely amazing. And I didn't have to take out the seats or anything. It just laid down flat, and I was just able to pack it up whenever I wanted to, and it was super, super comfortable. Yeah, it was really, really comfortable. But this year on my trip, I've been thinking about a Jeep, but not a Jeep Rubicon or Sport. I want to use possibly the Jeep Wagoneer, right? And if it's not going to be the Wagoneer, that Lincoln um, Navigator looks really, really good. Looks really comfortable. Looks really sporty. And I don't mind spending. It's my once a year big trip, so I don't mind spending the big bucks on something really, really nice and very pleasurable to drive, and right, and comfortable to car camp, right? But the other day when you were going to suggest, didn't you remember seeing me in my Jeep videos in my on my trip this summer? Because I knew you were in checking out those adventures and that park tour that I was on. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. Okay, you guys, we are going to pick our word for this week. We are in our 29th word. I'm not going to say how many weeks into it. We're more than half a year in, only because a couple of those words we have done over again, right? What comes across your path, right? It's meant to come across your path, and we have to take notice of these things. So if a word comes across my path a second time, means for me, it needs to be rehashed a little bit. And I got a lot out of the two words. It was acceptance that we got twice, and the word forgiveness that we got twice. If we get it a third time, I have no idea how I'm going to come at it, but we'll just tackle it and ride those waves when we do. Okay, let me get a highlighter here so we can highlight our next word, and it's going to be a first perspective. We're going to pick the word, and I'm going to delve into it. It's just going to be the first perspective, the first thing that comes across my mind on the subject, and we'll see how it flies. I hope everybody's having an amazing night. I hope everybody's right, comfortable. And it's important to be comfortable when we're, right, digging into the powerful words that can't help but get us to delve in a little bit deeper. Okay, you guys, here you go. Here we go. Definitely, it's a message for me first, but I hope it serves somebody else in that process and in this week that we're going to be delving into it. Okay, here it is. Oh, what a good one, you guys. Our 29th word is this word movement. Let me just highlight that off and let's get into it. And my first perspective is in that movement. And for me, movement comes with change. You know, lots of us can find ourselves kind of in a standhold in our lives. We can let our troubles and the obstacles and the difficulties keep us down and keep us in this woozy me. It's really kind of funny because I was thinking about this in a little bit of respect today on some of the lessons in my own life, in trying to bring that positive to the table. The other day on my Instagram, I was talking to one of my friends, and she said that she wished she could be as optimistic and happy, even though she's got all these difficulties and troubles in her life, that when she sees me, even though I struggle too, that I'm always keeping this smiley, optimistic, right? But that's the thing, you have to stay optimistic. And I wasn't always that optimistic person. It was in the evidence of recognizing what happened to me when I wasn't optimistic, when I wasn't enjoying the ride, when I was making the wrong choices, right? When I was not bringing about that change and that movement in my life because of the difficulties, allowing them to keep me stuck, allowing me not to pursue my goals, my dreams, not to chase after those things that would have made my life happier, right? So, in the past half a dozen years, just in the lessons, you get to realize how much our emotional browbeating keeps us in that state of miserableness, keeps us in that state of woesy me, keeps us in that state of not knowing and not even wanting to make any movement. But I only got that movement under my butt for a few different reasons. As a child and as a teenager, as a young adult, change was constant in my life, like a pinball machine, just battering from one. I used to say, like those cars, bumper cars, just back and forth and smacking up against the things and just reacting constantly. allowing myself to be triggered by things that I didn't even recognize, right? I recognized I was being triggered, but I didn't know why I was being triggered or how I was being triggered. I was just reacting in the moment. And in those negative states, right, there is no movement. And so you guys have heard me lots. There are lots of things that would have made it so that I wouldn't have showed up here today having these kind of conversations. Lots of things, right? And, it's only in my choices that I have been able to constantly bring change. And that constant was living vicariously through my father's adventures, right? I learned it. My influence, we are all not just like the people we surround ourselves with, but it's those early years, right? It's those early years that we learn the most, where we're absorbing absolutely everything around us, that we pick up lessons from those guardianships in our lives, right? And those caregivers, and whether they're properly caregiving or right, they're still your caregivers, and those lessons are going to be the lessons you get, and whether they're good lessons, bad lessons, or indifferent lessons, or no lessons at all, right? And lots of people move through their life having to, right, live vicariously through other people's experiences because they don't know what choices to make. They're not having the experiences, and they're not having the movement that they're supposed to have because they're so, I'm not saying negative in their thoughts, but right, they're worrying and they're stressing and they're browbeating themselves, right? Because we all have different experiences, and we all have different gaps in us, right? And so for me, I've always surrounded myself with people who had the strengths and the weaknesses of myself, right? But not in a way just to fill it up so I didn't have to do it, but I would watch. I would be a spectator. I would be a student, right? I'd be an apprentice. And I would learn to do that and fill that gap up for myself through my choices, make that movement. And each little lesson, and they were little lessons, they were just baby steps, just minute baby steps, because I didn't want to make some of those big mistakes that you could so easily drop into in a thought, right? And it just put me back in that state because, who wants to keep starting at the beginning, right? I have started at the beginning lots and lots of times. But because I'm not afraid, because I lived vicariously through my father's experience, and my father, he was an adventurer in life, and, you guys are going to get sick of hearing me say this story, but he lived every moment to the fullest, and he loved life, right? And him being the influence, right? And I am grateful that I was able to make my own choices, right? Some things we don't have a choice. It's kind of pounded into you, it's programmed into you, it's beaten into you. You have no choice in some things. But in this here, you do have some choices, and whether you choose to make a change or make some kind of movement, or whether you choose to sit and not budge and just allow yourself to be battered by the obstacles, right? Not even clearing, just letting it all pile. And that pile just gets bigger and nothing ever comes off that pile. I get it. Like, how can you be optimistic in that? And I know that feeling. I do. Even recently, I know that feeling when I don't pay my bills, when, right, I just allow just my regular house bills. And then because I'm highly sensitive and empathic, and because I do have that worry of the roof over my head, that I will compulse and I will stress and put myself in that state, right? Put yourself in that state, and that won't serve me. And so I'm grateful for the lessons in the past half a year that has allowed me to make a little bit of movement, right? But only through my choices, right? Because that movement only comes from change, and change only comes from movement. And both of those things are not going to happen without making a choice, right? And, I've made some amazing choices in my life, but I've just as easily made, right? Lots of little poopy choices. Otherwise, I would have been here a lot sooner than I was, right? But it's better late than never. And I am treading water. I'm putting as much time into my brand. I'm putting as much time into the lessons for myself as I do into the job that actually puts the roof over my head. That's my commitment. That's my accountability. But at the same time, right? Having that conversation the other day on Instagram, and, having somebody take note of that optimism. And I don't always feel optimism. Very rarely do I feel that, right? Because, those lessons are seeping in. But I don't always feel amazing, but it's in that movement forward, right? It's in the lessons, and it's in that amazing lesson of whistle while you work, right? That this is your life. And having that biggest character in my life, that biggest influence, right? That biggest guardianship in my life, be the example of what I most needed and what was most important, just by being a spectator, just by, right, hanging out with my father and paying attention, and just, you know having my heart go out to him every single day. Because, he struggled. He did struggle, but he kept his optimistic attitude, and it served him, right? And it served him, and it served me in serving him. And in the movement he made, it became the evidence for me, right? After I'd gotten some lessons, because I didn't recognize it at the time. Definitely didn't recognize it at the time. If I had had, oh my goodness, the conversations I would have had with my father, right? I couldn't imagine two heads bigger than one, because I am my father's daughter. What kind of movement could me and my father have done? What kind of course correction and what kind of evidence and influence could we have been as a team for the family, rather than him doing the very best that he could and falling short quite often, right? Just like I fell short, possibly just like you fall short. But in this brand that I've built, that I've created, through the lessons that I've received, and that creativity that brought me to this YouTube and Instagram, to these social platforms to start with, right? I'm so grateful. But I have to recognize where those lessons come, and I have to recognize that that was a gap that was filled and taught to me by the influences in my life. And I paid attention, right? And, I may have put it on the shelf. Maybe they were forgotten, right? It was not with my intent. And we had this kind of word yesterday on Instagram. It wasn't my intent for it to have happened the way it did, but it did. And I have to, right? I have to roll with that. I have to adapt and conquer. I have to ride that wave and I have to make that movement. I have to. So, how do I do that? I do it in baby steps. I do it in very small chunks. And when I have those days where I feel confident, when I feel like I'm on top of my game, when I'm not struggling with that imposter syndrome, right, when I can fully come to the table, then we delve into it a little bit harder, right? We take in a few more lessons. Those steps are a little bit more like strides rather than baby steps. But if all I'm expected to do is the baby steps, and I'm not even sure if I'm expected to do the baby steps, but in my own commitment, in my own accountability, right? I understand and I appreciate and I accept that I have to make those baby steps, right? It's part of my life now. It's right. This is part of my life, and it's going to continue to be a part of my life now because right, we're in the game. We're in the game, and it is in that movement forward that we get to experience and to be a spectator, not only be a spectator, but be a participant. And, you know, that lesson from my dad in being a spectator and maybe, right, a willing and sometimes unwilling participant, those lessons have served me. They have served me very well to the point where people recognize a little bit something in me that's a little bit shiny. Okay, you guys. That's my good cheer. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to give it some contemplation, a little bit of Googling, maybe come back with a different perspective, maybe come back with somebody else's perspective, or maybe there's an experience in my life. Oh, yeah, lots of experience. Oh, let's have a story time tomorrow. I haven't done a story time at all for the longest time, but let's do a story time tomorrow. One through my own experience. How about that? Tonight, I will, right? I've committed. So let's see, right? And I won't pick it myself unless I am not inspired by something. And if I'm not inspired by something, then I'll know that it's going to be in my choices. And let's see if we can make a little bit of movement tomorrow. Okay, you guys, that's my good share. Thank you, Melvin, for popping into my lives. And for those of you who pop in later, like I said, I hope you're having an amazing day and I hope you're having a great start to your week. And we'll see each other tomorrow. Bye bye.